And we're back. The subject of today will be information that I typically give to beginning graduate students, and I hope that it'll be useful to your final project as you're doing that. Now, the final project is a research project, but before we begin, let's go through a few administrative bits. The final project will consist of two components, namely a presentation, and that presentation, your slides, whether it's PowerPoint or PDF, those are the only things I will accept as a submission. So no Keynote, no Star Office, none of that. If you have Keynote, save it as a PowerPoint or PDF when you submit. You can present in Keynote, but you have to hand in one of two formats, that's PDF or PowerPoint. And so the presentation slides are due Monday, May 4th at 1 p.m. And you'll be giving a presentation between 10 and 12 minutes on the 4th of May from 1 p.m. To 3 p.m. Now, that time slot was predetermined by the registrar as our final exam period, and I use that period as the opportunity for you to give a presentation on your research findings. The final project itself, all of your materials will be due on Blackboard on the 8th of May, that's Friday at 8 p.m., and consequently that time is the date chosen and time set by the registrar as when dormitories close. And I realize that you all are working from home remotely, but at least by adhering to the registrar's schedule, it allows me to coordinate well with all the other classes that you're taking. So all submissions will be via Blackboard. Please do not wait till the last minute, and do not email me anything. I cannot fit all those emails. It will break my email. By Blackboard only. Okay. And so the final project involves reading some research publications. The first two, a comprehensive tutorial on software-defined networking, driving force for future internet technology and software-defined networking using OpenFlow protocols, applications, and architectural design choices. That's basically a review, survey papers, both of them, that goes over the same things that we've been talking about. What software-defined network is, the control plane and the data plane. And it also talks about the APIs, the so-called southbound API and northbound APIs, and various components within that SDN layer in each of those parts of the SDN stack. And so OpenFlow is the predominant protocol and API for software-defined networking. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one, how to make your presentation suck. Now, of course, this is meant to be a little bit humorous, it's meant to be entertaining, but in this, I hope to show you what a good presentation is by showing you a lot of bad things that people do in their presentations. And so the whole point of communication is to cause a sequence of thoughts in the minds of your audience. And you use pictures, you use words, you use all sorts of things like that in order to bring certain thoughts, sequence of thoughts in your audience's brain, and you hope that that sequence of thoughts is consistent with some message or point that you're trying to get across or you're trying to make. And so that's the whole goal of communications. And so when you speak, of course, and use pictures, you're communicating. Now suppose if I were to mention to you something like nice and warm, fuzzy, cute, right? You might think of this picture, these fluffy little puppy and kitten sitting in the grass, snuggling together. It's nice and warm and fluffy. Let's say I mentioned the word a nice, beautiful, cool summer evening, right? You might conjure up this picture in your mind, and I know that's a pretty huge moon, but nonetheless, you get that picture. Suppose if I said some wonderful, savory comfort food. Maybe you get that picture. I certainly do. This is zuppa de pêche fra diavola. It's wonderful seafood stew. But nonetheless, if you think of savory comfort food, maybe that conjures up a certain image in your mind. Now, of course, this is not the same for everybody. It's different for each person in your audience. So the main goal here is how to make your presentation not suck. And so I present this to you by basically doing all the things that make your presentation suck. All right. So before we begin, before I designed this presentation, I looked into the Urban Dictionary to make sure I understood what the word suck means. It's a colloquialism or slang term, and suck means something is not good or something is bad. And so the history behind the use of the word suck in early jazz musicians would say that a guy could really blow, meaning that he or she had a really good ability to play the horn, to play the saxophone, or to play the trumpet. And if someone couldn't play very well, they'd say that instead of being able to really blow, that this person was sucking on the horn, right? And that's where the term suck came from. And suck means that something bad came from it, right? You're not blowing, you're sucking the horn, meaning you're a horrible horn player, horrible saxophone player. And so it means that someone was playing the horn so poorly that he must be sucking on it instead of he can really blow or she can really blow the horn, right? He doesn't blow, he sucks. Okay, so that's the whole background behind the colloquialism to suck. And so this is about not making your presentation suck. Okay, so very gifted presenters like President Obama, they're really good at presenting. And so what happens? Well, he has a picture in his mind, and maybe that picture is this notion, if you close your eyes and listen to my words, it's this notion of comfortable at home. Now, for Obama, well, that might mean sitting in front of the fireplace. For you, it might mean, in the audience, remember, it might mean that you're relaxing on the couch at home. So while you're using words to communicate, you want to make sure the same concept is delivered, but that visualization of what it means is going to be different. But you still nonetheless want members of your audience to have a sequence of thoughts. And that sequence of thoughts could be very different, but as long as it has the same meaning, that communication is a success. Now, the flip side of this is if you're not careful, well, your description might conjure up something that goes horribly wrong in the minds of the audience. So while you're talking about fireplaces as being comfortable, someone might think of fireplace as that time when there was a horrific accident with a bonfire. Okay. So this communication is very important. And let's look at one way to make your presentation really suck. You can have an exceedingly long title slide because you assume people aren't smart enough to be able to figure it out. So you can also use a really small font so that no one is able to read your slide. Pack as much information in there as possible. You could also waste your audience's valuable attention span by devoting precious space on your slide with cheesy definitions. Don't engage your audience. Just sit there and read your slide, not even looking at your audience. And don't even add value, even though your audience is perfectly capable of reading the slides. Just sit there and read the slides to them. Don't add value. Don't interpret the material. Don't add value by helping them interpret or paint a picture in their mind's eye about what your subject is and what your point is. And of course, you should waste everyone's time and attention in the audience by including unhelpful definitions and grandiose wandering statements. So because this is a presentation, I felt it important to look up in Webster's for the definition of presentation. Presentation is a noun. It refers to something that is presented. Now, the verb present means to give something to someone in a formal way or ceremony, which this is, to formally talk about something to a group of people, your group of people, and to make something available to be used or considered, which is exactly what we're doing. Now, this idea of presenting and even just PowerPoint, you could think it goes way back through ancient times. From hieroglyphics to ancient scrolls, throughout the history of civilization, humankind has strived to find ever increasingly compelling ways to impart thoughts and experiences among peers. That's quite interesting. But behold, the modern era has brought powerful tools capable of employing digital animation, like through PowerPoint, that bring the written word to life. Very powerful. I will use animation to bring this, my presentation, to life for you, the audience. Okay, so, and of course, use fortuitous animation with funky colors. Because, yeah, that is really how you wow your audience. And use an exceedingly long title slide because you assume people aren't smart enough to be able to figure it out for themselves. Don't use pictures and diagrams very much, and make sure you take credit for the work of others. Now, an example of an idea that I want to present to you is I'm thinking of developing a new technology, and this is for high-speed point-to-point communication, and I call it network field lasers. I've been working on a logo for this, and here's the logo. Check out my cool logo. Isn't it awesome? Great. So, and of course, the first time you look at your slides, don't practice. Practice is for the weak. The first time you should look at your slides is when you're giving your presentation. And, of course, don't bother to check your spelling. Spelling is for the futile, is for the weak. Don't do that. Always go off topic. By the way, let me tell you about some of my research. In this project called Managing Indoor-Outdoor Transitions in Autonomous Robot Wheelchairs, we focus on the problem of how you attend to features and switch your sensory apparatus as you transition between an indoor environment and an outdoor environment. Now, the key challenge in that is that this may be an abrupt change, or this may be a very gradual change. And so when we started this project, of course, we needed an autonomous wheelchair. And of course, you can't go out and buy one. So we built our own. We started with a power chair, and we modeled some things in cardboard here. You see the cardboard rigging for the sensor apparatus. And we took precision measurements of that. And we used cardboard because cardboard is very cheap and available. And then we took these precision measurements and we took them to the machine shop, and we bought some aluminum stock and had the machinist build an aluminum frame. And that's the aluminum frame you see here. We tested out the lighting, the sensors, and we have cameras. We have 3D cameras, and these 3D cameras have a pixel array. Instead of pixels for displaying images, it has 78 or 72 by 120 lasers that pulse 10 times a second and gives you terrain measurements. And so we're going to mount this on the underside of the armrest to give you surface terrain measurements out in front of the vehicle. Of the wheelchair. And so we also have here in this last frame the power distribution grid. And a lot of this hardware integration is undergrad driven. A lot of students have been working on this, and we're about 65% of the way there for autonomous control, computerized control of this wheelchair. And so that's just a little sidebar I thought I'd throw in. It has nothing to do with the topic. And of course, end your presentation abruptly, and that's it. And so I hope that you all would look at this, and I hope you are failing miserably at making your presentation suck, right? And these are just some, and I try to keep it amusing, but these are some of the things a lot of people do. Please don't make your presentation suck. Okay. Let's take a look at something a little bit more serious, a little bit less humorous, and how you read a research publication. Certainly, we have two publications that are provided for your research project to reinforce the material we've talked about during the semester concerning software-defined networking. And then your job is to go out and find an application of software-defined networking in another publication. And then you're going to report on that for your presentation. And so let's look at reading a scientific publication. So when you take a publication, you're going to go off and you're going to search for a topic. You're going to take 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes, a small amount of time. And the question in that 10 minutes you're going to ask yourself is, what is the main contribution of this paper? Now, of course, when you're trying to find a topic, you don't go out and read the entire publication. That's highly inefficient. You want to decide if a presentation, or if a publication rather, is fruitful for you to give it more thorough consideration. And so you take 10 minutes and get this answer to this question: what is the main contribution? What are the authors and the researchers for this work? What contribution are they making? What problem are they solving? What application have they brought to bear? And so the question then is, how do you get this information? Well, you say, well, Dr. Holness, I read the paper. Well, do you know how to read a scientific publication? It's not like reading a textbook or literature book. It's quite different beast unto itself. And so every research publication is going to have roughly these sections. You're going to have the title, what the authors and where those authors are from. You're going to have an abstract. You're going to have an introduction section, background, methodology, experiments, analysis, and then the end part, conclusion of future work. And so the title, authors, and affiliation address who did the work. It's nice to know where they are, who they work for, what group they're a part of. The abstract, you can think of an executive summary, a high-level summary, kind of like the cliff notes of the publication, a high-level summary or executive summary of the entire paper. You also have the introduction, and that introduction is sort of setting the stage. Why should anyone care about what they've done? And then the background is what is the problem that they're addressing. Methodology section talks about their contribution, what it is that I am doing, the researcher, specifically. And then there's a validation, the experiments, validate or confirming that my approach is sound. How well does my approach work? What impact does it have? And the analysis is the interpretation of what the results of my experiments mean. And then that last part, conclusion of future work section of the paper, what is the impact? What comes next? Now, of course, they might have different names, these sections, but every scientific publication has these sections. So then the question is, in what order do you do the reading? Do you read it sequentially? First section, second section, third section, and so forth? Or do you do something else? Well, I will tell you, it is an absolute mistake to read it section 1 through section 8. That is a recipe for burning a lot more time than you need to. So let's take a look about considerations for the order in which you should navigate, not the order you do navigate. So the question you ask is, what is the purpose of a research publication? Who is the audience? How many research publications might a graduate student or a researcher, undergrad included, how many publications might you read throughout your research project? What happens if you don't understand that publication? And then, why do people write research publications? How are you judged as a researcher? So let's think about these to help you shape how you go through research publications. So the purpose of a research publication is about the sharing of information. You're trying to share that nugget of information that you've discovered as a result of performing your experiments. And so science is built upon the shoulders of others. Certainly, the experiments that you do as a researcher are built upon experiments that someone else has done. And then someone else will come along, take your results, and build upon that. And that's how science proceeds from generation to generation. Also within a generation, how science develops, that people have all sorts of nuanced contributions that build upon the shoulders of other contributions. So the audience is a scientific community, sometimes the engineering community, and as undergrads, you're part of the scientific community, junior members, you might say, and so you're out to go through the research publications to find out interesting applications of software-defined networking. So how many might you read throughout some project, be it graduate school or undergrad? As many as humanly possible, and even then some. And so the real learning happens when you're reading these research publications. So my reason for giving you 2 papers on software-defined networking is because when you read about a topic you've already covered, and we certainly have covered SDN in this class, you get a better understanding by hearing the viewpoints of different people. It's really, really important to read as much as possible. What if you don't understand it? So what? Just learn it. At some point, you have to learn it. And little by little, in bite-sized chunks, you get more and more and more, in addition to hearing it described a different way. Maybe the way the book and way I describe it, in some aspect just might not resonate with you. By reading other people's account of the same information, maybe they might say something in a way that resonates with you. So it's really important to read things, even things you've already learned, because you get a different viewpoint interpreting that particular information. And certainly, as a researcher, you're judged by your contributions. What have you contributed? So if somebody says, I'm a researcher, your first question, what contributions have you made? And they'd be more than happy to tell you. Okay, so going back to this, what order should you navigate? Absolutely, you should not navigate, and I'll repeat that, you should not navigate or read through a paper in the order in which things are presented. And so let's look at what you should look at first, right? These are the sections, and I've numbered these sections. And what I will do is put different numbers on these sections based on the order in which you should read them. So the title, authors, and affiliation. You read that first. That hasn't changed. The next thing you read is the abstract, okay? Because you want to know what this thing is about. So the third thing you read is not the introduction. You're going to read the conclusion and future work. So what happens is, say who did the work, what is the work about, and then 3 says, were they successful? So when you search for a certain topic, applications of SDN, well, the first thing you do is you read the first section, second section, and then you read that last section. That's the third order. The order of the third thing you read is conclusion of future work. And that will take about 10 minutes. And when you spend that 10 minutes, the question you should ask yourself is this publication worthwhile? Worthwhile. You want to know if this publication is something that's interesting to you and if it's something you should commit more time to understanding the details, right? That's really, really important because you might search for an application of software-defined networking and you might find maybe 20 papers, 10 papers. Let's say you found 10 papers. Well, certainly you're not going to have time to read through all of them. Nobody ever does that. So what you do, you spend 10 minutes on the first paper. You spend 10 minutes on the second paper, and so forth. Very quick. And then you read the first section, the title, author, affiliation, abstract, conclusion, future work, and then you ask yourself, is this publication worth it? Now, of course, the abstract tells you what the experiment or research was about, and then this conclusion, future work, tells you, were they successful? How well did it work? What did they find? What is interesting about this? And what is the larger impact about why this is important? Okay? All right. So now after you read conclusions, future work, you decide either I reject the paper or I'm going to set aside the paper, and that's the one I'm going to devote more resources to. So now you've found a paper with an application. So the next thing you do, okay, well, you're going to read a little bit of this introduction. You want to know why anyone should care. So you're going to read that introduction, and then you're going to start with his background. So you read a little bit of the background. Let's call that 5A. And then you might find, my goodness, I don't quite understand this thing that they're talking about. So maybe after 5A, you go off to the internet and you search for information to help you understand things in the background that you might not understand. Really important to understand the problem. So then after that, you might have a few iterations of going from 5A back to 4 to go back through parts of the introduction. And once you've done that, okay, you read further through the background, 5B. Okay. So after you've done that, you say, all right, well, that's my background. Now I want to look at my methodology, and that's 6. And so after you look at your methodology, well, you might decide to go a little bit into the methodology. So let's rename that 6A. And then you start to peek a little bit into your experiments, 7. So after you peek into your experiments, you go back to your methodology. And you might go back and forth a few times between your methodology and experiments to understand what they're doing and how they set out to demonstrate, validate what they're doing. So then after that, you now pop down after a few cycles back and forth. You go down to the analysis. That's going to be step 8. And then you reread your conclusion, step 9. Okay. And so certainly within the methodology, you might find you have to go out, get some information, and come back to the methodology. In your experiments, maybe they use an analytical technique or an approach for the experiments, a certain type of apparatus that requires you to go out and find out what it is, and you come back to the experiments. And then maybe for the analysis, maybe there's an analytical technique that they're using, and you don't understand it completely, so you need to go out, get some information, and come back to your analysis. And so this reading of a research publication, you first have a filtering function based on the title, author's affiliation, the abstract, conclusion, future work. And then once you have a paper you like, you go through section, the introduction, background, bounce around a little bit, go off to get some more information if you need it. Methodology, bounce around a little bit, go off to get information if you need it. And then through the analysis, go off to get information if you need it, come back, and then conclusion. And that's where you spend your time in this part of the process that consists of 4, 5A, 5B, 6A, 7, and 8. That's where you're going to spend the bulk of your time. Okay? All right. So with that, I will end there. I hope this is helpful to you. I look forward to your research projects and your presentations. Please make sure you practice. That's the surest way to deliver a good presentation, and make sure your presentation doesn't suck. Have good slides with pictures that is compelling, no fortuitous animation. Don't have squeeze lots and lots of text into your slides. You're trying to add value. You're trying to communicate certain ideas to your audience. You're trying to add value to what you've read in the paper. Okay. So last words. This is the last lecture. You are to congratulate yourself. I'm very proud of all of you. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. And thank you for taking the class. I know this class is required in the curriculum, but I thank you nonetheless. I hope this has given you a rigorous, comprehensive coverage of the entire networking stack, and it gives you a strong foundation for future work. It is not uncommon for students to get careers, get jobs as a direct result of their final project in this class. There are many alumni who've gone on to do that. And so I hope it has provided you a strong foundation. And if you're interested in networking, I encourage you to go further. This is certainly the end of the beginning, because there's a lot more specialization stuff that you can do, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's distributed systems, whether it's data centers, and all software-defined networking, certainly, and all sorts of other things where you can go with this material as a strong foundation. So with that, I will end there. Thank you. And as always, please stay safe, stay healthy. I appreciate all of your hard work, particularly as we have all been working from home amidst this COVID-19 pandemic. I will see you around. Take care.